On a moonless night of December 15th, in the forgotten edges of Boston Harbor, 7-year-old Lily Morgan clutched her torn teddy bear and sprinted through iron gates that had remained sealed to mortals for 5 centuries. The winter air cut through her thin pajamas as snowflakes melted against her feverish cheeks, each labored breath visible in the frigid darkness. "They're beating my mama and nobody will help," she sobbed to the towering figure upon the onyx throne. Unaware, she addressed Lord Sebastian Drake, the vampire sovereign whose shadow had stretched across New England since colonial times, whose mercy was whispered about but never witnessed. The gathered immortal court stared in shocked silence as blood from her scraped knees stained the immaculate marble floor, a human child daring to interrupt the solstice feast, the most sacred night in vampire tradition. The ancient chandelier creaked overhead, casting prismatic shadows that danced like specters across the girl's determined face as her small fingers reached imploringly toward the king. This is the story of how one desperate child's plea awakened emotions long thought extinguished in an immortal heart. Subscribe now to discover the moment when the most feared creature in Boston's supernatural world rose from his throne to answer a little girl's cry for justice. The snow fell in hypnotic patterns outside the towering windows of Ravenscroft Manor, its grounds stretching for acres across the hidden peninsula that no mortal maps accurately depicted. Inside the grand hall, hundreds of candles illuminated the solstice feast, their flames unnaturally still in the absence of drafts. Immortals from across the northeastern territories had gathered, dressed in finery that spanned centuries of fashion, all meticulously arranged according to rank and bloodline. Lord Sebastian Drake observed the proceedings with the detached interest of one who had witnessed thousands of such gatherings. His pale fingers rested lightly on the carved armrests of his onyx throne, the dark stone veined with crimson that seemed to pulse in the candlelight. 4 centuries of rule had taught him that true power lay in stillness, in watching, waiting, and knowing precisely when to strike. The vampires below maintained the appearance of revelry while carefully monitoring their sovereign's reactions. Goblets of warmed blood were raised in ritualistic toasts, the crimson liquid from different donor types providing varied bouquets that only immortal senses could fully appreciate. The grand hall of Ravenscroft Manor rose 3 stories high, its vaulted ceiling adorned with Renaissance frescoes depicting the Great Concealment, the moment when vampire kind had retreated into shadow, establishing the boundaries that now separated the mortal and immortal worlds. The marble floor, imported from Italian quarries in the 18th century, gleamed like black ice beneath the dancers who moved with inhuman grace. "Your Lordship," Lady Victoria Winters approached the dais and curtsied deeply, her Victorian-era gown rustling softly against the marble steps. "The Connecticut Coven sends their deepest regards with their tribute. The quality is exceptional this season." Sebastian inclined his head, acknowledging her words with the barest movement. "Connecticut has always understood quality," he said, his voice carrying the faint accent of his long-forgotten human origins. Unlike some other regions, the gathered courtiers stilled momentarily before resuming their activities with renewed attention to decorum. Sebastian's gaze drifted to the Massachusetts delegation, whose representatives visibly tensed under his scrutiny. The Massachusetts territory faces unique challenges this winter. "Your Lordship," Lord Edmund Pierce offered carefully, stepping forward from his position at the eastern table. "The hunters have grown bolder, more organized." "Hunters?" Sebastian repeated, the word carrying centuries of disdain. "Are we not the apex predators of this world? Have we fallen so far that we now quiver before those who were once our prey?" No one dared respond. "Massachusetts will resolve its difficulties," Sebastian continued, "or Massachusetts will welcome new leadership. I trust my meaning is clear." "Perfectly clear, Your Lordship," Lord Pierce replied, his face a carefully composed mask that failed to hide his apprehension. The tension in the hall stretched taut as a violin string. Then, precisely as the ancient grandfather clock began to toll midnight, the massive oak doors at the entrance burst open with a sound that silenced even the orchestra. The vampire guards positioned there turned in shock, their disciplined stances faltering as a small figure darted between them. A child, a human child, raced into the sacred gathering, her ragged breathing audible in the sudden silence. "Please, somebody help," she cried, her voice echoing against the ancient stone walls. The girl couldn't have been more than 7 years old. Her dark brown hair hung in tangled waves around a tear-streaked face. She wore flannel pajamas decorated with cartoon penguins, now torn at one knee where blood, the scent immediate and enticing to every predator present, seeped from a fresh scrape. She clutched a worn teddy bear missing one eye, its stuffing visible through a torn seam. The assembled vampires froze in collective horror. Human children did not enter Ravenscroft Manor. Humans did not enter at all unless formally invited or brought as tribute, and no one, under any circumstances, interrupted the solstice feast. The guards recovered quickly and moved to intercept the child, but Sebastian raised one pale hand, halting them mid-stride. The little girl spotted him then, perhaps drawn to the stillness that set him apart from the suddenly chaotic room. She ran straight toward the onyx throne, either unaware of or unconcerned by the lethal danger surrounding her. "Please," she gasped, stumbling to a stop at the foot of the dais. "They're hurting my mama at home. Nobody will help us. The police came before, but they just left. Please make them stop." Centuries of protocol shattered like crystal. Vampires half rose from their seats, hissing in shock at the child's audacity. Guards looked to their sovereign for instruction, hands resting on weapons that had tasted human blood countless times before. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet as Sebastian Drake rose from his throne. He descended the 7 steps with deliberate grace, his movements fluid and controlled. His formal attire, a perfectly tailored suit of midnight black with a waistcoat threaded with silver, absorbed rather than reflected the candlelight, creating the impression of a void moving through space. The court watched in horrified fascination. They had witnessed this approach before, the predator stalking toward prey, the calm preceding violence. The girl looked up at him, her hazel eyes wide but unflinching. She did not cower as he towered over her small form. "What is your name, child?" Sebastian asked, his voice so soft it was almost gentle. "Lily," she answered, wiping tears with the back of her hand. "Lily Morgan, please, sir. My mama needs help now. My dad and his friend came home real mad. They're hurting her bad." "And how did you find this place, Lily Morgan?" Sebastian circled her slowly, examining her from every angle. "Few adults know of Ravenscroft Manor. Fewer still would approach it willingly. I heard the big kids talking at school. They dare each other to come up to the gates, but nobody ever does." Her small hands tightened around her teddy bear. "They said a king lives here who can make anybody do anything, and I need somebody to make my dad stop." A ripple of murmurs passed through the court. Children repeating playground myths about their manor was one thing, a reality they tolerated and sometimes encouraged, but for a child to actually find the estate and breach its boundaries was unprecedented. The magical wards alone should have confused and redirected her. "Who is hurting your mother?" Sebastian asked, something ancient and predatory shifting behind his eyes. "My dad and his friend Marcus. They were drinking and got real mad when Mama said we were leaving tomorrow." Lily's voice trembled, but her gaze remained steady. "She told me to hide in the closet, but I sneaked out the window instead, to find help." Sebastian went still in a way only immortals could achieve, a perfect stillness that made even his clothing appear frozen in time. "You ran through the winter night alone to seek aid from creatures of darkness," he observed, something unidentifiable flickering in his expression. "How very desperate." "Are you the king?" Lily asked directly. "I am Lord Sebastian Drake," he replied, "sovereign of the Northeastern Territories. Then you can help. Grown-ups who are in charge are supposed to protect people who can't protect themselves. That's what my teacher says." The assembled court held its collective breath, awaiting their lord's reaction to such staggering impertinence. Sebastian studied the child for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Lady Victoria," he said finally, addressing the elegantly dressed vampire who had presented the Connecticut tribute. "You maintain connections with Boston law enforcement, do you not?" Lady Victoria rose gracefully. "I do, your lordship. Have your people attend to a domestic disturbance at—" He looked down at Lily. "Where is your home, child?" 47 Harborview Drive, Lily recited. Apartment 3C, the blue building by the old factory. 47 Harborview Drive, Apartment 3C, Sebastian repeated. Ensure the human authorities understand the gravity of the situation. Lady Victoria withdrew immediately, already retrieving a cell phone from a hidden pocket in her Victorian gown. Lord Thorne, Sebastian continued, addressing a broad-shouldered vampire with military bearing. Take a security team. Observe the situation until human authorities arrive. Do not intervene unless absolutely necessary. Yes, your lordship. Lord Thorne bowed and signalled to several guards who followed him from the hall. The remaining vampires exchanged glances of disbelief. In 4 centuries of rule, Lord Drake had never involved himself in the affairs of individual humans, particularly those with no political or strategic value. This child had somehow accomplished what centuries of petitioners had failed to do. She had moved the immovable. What of the child? Lady Victoria asked, having returned from making her calls. She cannot remain here. The accords are specific about human children. Sebastian regarded Lily thoughtfully. She will remain under my protection until the situation is resolved. Here in Ravenscroft? Lord Edmund's voice rose in shock. Your lordship, a human child in the manor during solstice. It is unprecedented. Many things about this night are unprecedented, Lord Pierce, Sebastian replied, his tone dropping several degrees. Yet here we stand. He turned to a servant waiting nearby. Prepare the blue guest room. Provide warm clothing and appropriate human sustenance. The servant bowed deeply. At once, your lordship. But when he approached Lily, she stepped back, shaking her head. I'm not going anywhere without my mamma, she insisted, her voice rising. You said you'd help. Help is already on its way, child, Sebastian said. There is nothing more you can do now. You would only be placing yourself in further danger. But what if they don't get there fast enough? Tears welled in Lily's eyes again. What if they hurt her worse before help comes? Something flickered across Sebastian's face, an emotion so brief and unfamiliar that the watching court couldn't identify it. Very well, he said after a moment of consideration. You wish to ensure your mother's safety? Then you shall accompany me. The collective shock in the room manifested as a single, audible intake of breath. Your lordship, Lord Edmund stepped forward, his concern overriding protocol. The solstice feast, the territorial negotiations, your presence is required here. Is it? Sebastian's voice dropped to a dangerous register. Are you perhaps presuming to instruct your sovereign, Lord Pierce? Lord Edmund immediately dropped to one knee, head bowed. Never, your lordship. I merely sought to remind. I require no reminders. Sebastian turned away dismissively. Lady Victoria will oversee the remainder of the feast. The negotiations will resume tomorrow night. His gaze swept the room, challenging anyone to object. None did. He looked down at Lily. Come, child. We shall see about your mother. Lily didn't hesitate. She slipped her small hand into Sebastian's pale one, entirely unaware of how the assembled court recoiled at the sight. Human touch was considered beneath vampires of rank, especially the casual touch of an unwashed child. Yet their sovereign permitted it without comment, leading the girl from the hall with unhurried strides. The moment the doors closed behind them, the court erupted into whispers. Outside the grand hall, Lily struggled to keep pace with Sebastian's long strides. He noticed her difficulty and slowed, another unprecedented accommodation. Your people, will they get there in time? Lily asked, her breath forming small clouds in the chilly corridor. They are already there, Sebastian assured her. My kind moves very quickly when necessary. Are they strong? My dad is really big, and his friend Marcus is even bigger. They are stronger than any human could hope to be, Sebastian said. Your mother will be safe until we arrive. They reached the manor's grand entrance where a sleek black Bentley awaited, engine purring softly. A uniformed driver held the door open, his face betraying only the slightest surprise at the sight of his master's companion. Harborview Drive, Sebastian instructed as they settled into the vehicle's luxurious interior. Make haste. Yes, your lordship. The driver closed the door and took his position behind the wheel. Lily perched on the edge of the leather seat, her legs too short to touch the floor. She hugged her teddy bear tightly as she stared through the window, watching Ravenscroft Manor recede into the darkness. "Why does your house look so scary?" she asked suddenly. Sebastian regarded her with faint surprise. Few humans ever addressed him directly, and none with the unguarded curiosity of a child. "It was not designed for human comfort," he replied. "It was designed to inspire awe. My teacher says there's a difference between respect and fear. Your teacher sounds unusually perceptive." The corner of Sebastian's mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile, but something adjacent to it. "Though sometimes fear is the more efficient tool." Lily considered this seriously. "My dad wants everybody to be scared of him," she said finally. "That's why Mama said we had to leave. She said we can't live scared all the time." The Bentley glided silently through the deserted streets of Boston, its windows tinted to protect its vampiric occupant from even moonlight. Lily pressed her face against the glass, leaving small foggy patches from her breath as she watched snowflakes swirl through the glow of street lamps. "There it is," she said suddenly, pointing to a weathered apartment building with peeling blue paint. "That's where we live." Before the vehicle had fully stopped, Sebastian could detect the disturbance inside. His preternatural hearing caught the sounds of shouting, glass breaking, and a woman's muffled cries. The sharp scent of fear and fresh blood permeated the night air, detectable even through the car's sealed windows. Lord Thorne materialized beside the Bentley as Sebastian stepped out, his expression grim. "Two human males," he reported quietly, "heavily intoxicated. They have been assaulting a female for approximately 20 minutes. The human authorities have been contacted, but are delayed due to weather conditions." "The woman's status?" Sebastian asked. "Conscious but injured. The assault is ongoing." Lily tried to push past them, but Sebastian placed a restraining hand on her shoulder. "You will remain here," he said, his tone allowing no argument. "But my mama will be better served if you are not in that room," Sebastian finished firmly. "Lord Thorne will ensure your safety until I return." Lord Thorne looked momentarily startled at this assignment, but bowed immediately. "As you command, your lordship." Sebastian straightened the cuffs of his formal attire and walked toward the apartment building with measured steps. To human eyes, he would appear as nothing more than an elegantly dressed gentleman, perhaps out of place in this neighborhood, but otherwise unremarkable. He followed the sounds of violence to apartment 3C, where the door hung partially open, its cheap lock broken. Inside, the scene matched Lord Thorne's assessment. Two large men cornered a woman who was pressed against the kitchen counter, blood trickling from her split lip and a darkening bruise forming beneath one eye. One man held her by the throat, while the other drew back his fist for another blow. "That will be quite enough," Sebastian said from the doorway. The men turned, startled by the interruption. The one with his hand on the woman's throat released her and stepped forward. "Who the fuck are you?" he demanded, alcohol slurring his words. "Get lost, fancy pants," the other added. "This is family business." Sebastian stepped into the apartment, allowing the door to swing shut behind him. "I am making it my business," he said quietly. The larger of the two men, his face flushed with rage and whiskey, lurched forward. "You picked the wrong door to knock on, asshole." He swung a meaty fist toward Sebastian's face, a blow that would have shattered the nose of an ordinary man. Sebastian caught the fist mid-swing and held it immobile with no apparent effort. The man's eyes widened in shock and pain as his forward momentum halted abruptly. "What the hell?" Sebastian applied the slightest pressure, and the bones in the man's wrist ground audibly against each other. He dropped to his knees with a howl of pain. "I dislike repetition," Sebastian said, his voice still conversational. "But I will say once more, that is enough." The second man, momentarily frozen in disbelief, recovered enough to grab a beer bottle from the counter. He smashed it against the edge of the sink and brandished the jagged remains. "Let him go or I'll cut your fucking throat," he threatened, advancing with the makeshift weapon. Sebastian regarded the broken bottle with detached interest. "Your creativity is noted, if not your wisdom." The man lunged forward, slashing wildly. Sebastian released his hold on the first attacker and sidestepped with preternatural grace. In a movement too swift for human eyes to track, He grasped the second man's wrist and applied precise pressure to the nerve cluster. The broken bottle fell from suddenly numb fingers as Sebastian lifted him by his throat until his feet dangled above the floor. "Predictable," Sebastian commented as the man clawed desperately at the hand cutting off his oxygen, "and ultimately futile." He tossed the man aside as casually as discarding an empty wrapper. The human crashed into a bookshelf and slid to the floor, gasping and clutching his throat. The first man, still on his knees cradling his injured wrist, backed away until he hit the wall. "Look, man, this is just a misunderstanding." "Is it?" Sebastian interrupted. "How curious that humans consistently misunderstand the consequences of their own violence." A soft sound from the kitchen drew his attention. The woman, Lily's mother, was leaning heavily against the counter, one arm wrapped protectively around her ribs. Despite her injuries, her gaze was clear and direct as she looked at Sebastian. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "Where's Lily?" "Your daughter is safe," Sebastian assured her. "She is waiting outside under protection." Relief washed over the woman's face, followed immediately by confusion. "How did she—" Before Sebastian could respond, sirens wailed in the distance, growing steadily louder. "It appears the authorities approach at last," he observed. "How fortunate for these gentlemen. They will face human justice rather than mine." The first man struggled to his feet, still holding his injured wrist. "The cops don't scare me. Rachel won't press charges. She knows what happens if she does." Sebastian turned to him, his expression unchanged, but something ancient and deadly shifting in the depths of his eyes. "Your daughter displays remarkable courage," he said softly. "A child willing to brave the winter night alone to seek help from strangers. I suspect her mother possesses similar strength." The woman, Rachel, looked up sharply. "Lily went out alone in this weather? How did she find help?" "She found her way to my residence," Sebastian replied carefully, "and convinced me of the urgency of her situation." The sirens stopped outside the building, followed by slamming car doors and the crackle of police radios. Flashlight beams swept past the windows as officers approached. "This isn't over," the man growled at Rachel. "You're still my wife. The kid is still mine." Sebastian moved closer to him, his movement so swift it seemed he had teleported across the room. He spoke very softly, his lips barely moving. "If you approach this woman or her child again, I will know and I will find you. The consequences will be permanent." Something in Sebastian's eyes, perhaps a momentary glimpse of the predator behind the human mask, penetrated even the man's alcohol-fogged brain. He paled visibly and pressed himself against the wall. The apartment door burst open as police officers entered, weapons drawn. "Police, everyone freeze!" Sebastian straightened and stepped away from the cowering man, his hands visible and his posture non-threatening. "Officers," he greeted them calmly, "I believe you'll find these two gentlemen responsible for the reported assault. The lady requires medical attention." The officers took in the scene, the two disheveled men, the injured woman, and the impeccably dressed stranger who somehow seemed untouched by the surrounding chaos. "Sir, I need you to step outside while we secure the scene," one officer directed Sebastian. He inclined his head slightly and moved toward the door. As he passed Rachel, she reached out and caught his sleeve. "My daughter," she said urgently. "Is she really okay?" "She is waiting to see you," Sebastian assured her. "I will bring her to you once the officers have completed their work." "Thank you," Rachel whispered. "Whoever you are." Sebastian stepped into the hallway where Lord Thorn waited, Lily secure behind him. When she spotted Sebastian, she darted forward. "Is my mama okay? Did you stop the bad men? Can I see her now?" "Your mother is injured but will recover," Sebastian told her. "The authorities have arrived and are dealing with your father and his friend." Lily's shoulders sagged with relief. "Can I see her now?" "Shortly. The officers must secure the scene first." She nodded, accepting this with the resignation of a child who had navigated such situations before. She hugged her teddy bear tightly, its missing eye and torn seam suddenly seeming profoundly tragic to Sebastian. "How did you find my home?" he asked. "Ravenscroft Manor is not easily located by humans. I followed the path through the woods behind our building," Lily explained. The big kids say if you go all the way up the hill and through the old graveyard, you'll find the Vampire King's castle, but you have to do it at night when the moon isn't showing. And you believed these big kids? Lily shrugged. I didn't know if it was true, but nobody else would help us. The police came before when the neighbors called, but they just talked to my dad for a minute and then left, and my mom's sister won't answer her phone anymore. Sebastian studied her, this small human who had braved the winter night and childhood monsters on nothing more than desperate hope. That was extraordinarily brave, Lily Morgan. I wasn't brave, she said simply. I was scared, but Mama always says being scared doesn't mean you can't still do the right thing. Before Sebastian could respond to this unexpected wisdom, paramedics emerged from the apartment, supporting Rachel Morgan as she limped toward the waiting ambulance. Mama! Lily cried, running toward her. Rachel dropped painfully to one knee and gathered her daughter into a tight embrace. Lily! Oh my God, baby, are you okay? I was so worried. I thought you were hiding in the closet. I went to get help, Lily explained, touching her mother's bruised face gently. I found the Vampire King's castle like the big kids said, and he came to help us. Rachel looked up, her eyes meeting Sebastian's over her daughter's head. In that moment, something passed between them, a silent understanding. She didn't know exactly what he was, but she recognized he was something beyond ordinary. Ma'am, we need to get you to the hospital, a paramedic interrupted. Those ribs could be broken. My daughter can accompany you, Sebastian said, stepping forward. I will ensure all necessary arrangements are made. One of the police officers approached, notepad in hand. Sir, we'll need your statement about what happened here. Sebastian turned to him, his expression pleasant, but somehow compelling. Of course, officer, though I believe my associate has already provided all relevant information. He gestured toward Lord Thorne, who now stood speaking with another officer, an official-looking identification displayed. The officer's eyes unfocused slightly, then cleared. Right. Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Drake, Sebastian supplied. Sebastian Drake. Mr. Drake. The officer nodded. We'll be in touch if we need anything further. As the officer walked away, Rachel stared at Sebastian with growing wariness. What are you? She whispered. Someone who responded to your daughter's request for help, he replied simply. Nothing more. The Vampire King, Lily insisted, still clinging to her mother. From the castle on the hill. He's really strong, Mama. Rachel's arms tightened around her daughter, her eyes never leaving Sebastian's face. How you need medical attention, he reminded her gently. Your injuries require treatment. After a moment's hesitation, Rachel nodded. She allowed the paramedic to help her into the ambulance, keeping Lily close against her side. What happens now? She asked as the paramedic prepared to close the doors. Kevin won't stay locked up long. His family has connections. A concern for tomorrow, Sebastian said. Tonight, focus on recovery. Rachel studied him, countless questions in her eyes. Why did you help us? Lily said she just walked up to your house and asked. Your daughter displayed extraordinary courage, Sebastian replied. Such quality deserves recognition. The paramedic cleared his throat impatiently. Ma'am, we really need to go. Rachel nodded, but her eyes remained locked with Sebastian's. Thank you, she said simply. For whatever reason you did it. Thank you. The ambulance doors closed, and the vehicle pulled away, lights flashing but sirens silent in the late-night residential neighborhood. Sebastian watched until it disappeared around a corner, his expression thoughtful. Lord Thorne approached cautiously. Your lordship, the human authorities have been adjusted. They believe we represent a private security firm investigating domestic violence cases. The husband and his associate will remain in custody, regardless of outside influence. Good, Sebastian said. Return to Ravenscroft. Inform the court that I will not be returning tonight. Your lordship, Lord Thorne questioned, unable to hide his surprise. The solstice feast will continue without me, Sebastian finished. Lady Victoria is more than capable of overseeing the remaining ceremonies. May I inquire as to your destination? You may not, Sebastian replied, his tone making it clear that the conversation was over. "Of course, your lordship." Lord Thorne bowed and departed, leaving Sebastian standing alone in the gently falling snow. The vampire sovereign glanced at the police officers, still documenting the scene, at the curious neighbours peering from behind partially opened doors, at the small patches of blood on the hallway carpet, where Rachel Morgan had paused while being escorted to the ambulance, the human world and the vampire world, intersecting in ways that violated centuries of careful separation, all because one small girl had dared to seek help from monsters. With a thoughtful expression, Sebastian Drake returned to his waiting Bentley. "The hospital," he instructed the driver, "and then I shall require access to certain resources within the human legal system." "Yes, your lordship," the driver replied, unable to completely hide his confusion. As the Bentley pulled away from Harbourview Drive, Sebastian gazed out at the passing city, the human world that existed alongside his own, separate yet connected by threads most mortals never perceived. For 4 centuries, he had maintained that separation with ruthless discipline. Now a child's tears had bridged the gap, and he found himself unexpectedly crossing boundaries long established. The night was still young, and for the first time in centuries, Sebastian Drake found himself curious about what might come next. Rachel Morgan sat on the edge of a hospital bed, wincing as a nurse wrapped bandages around her torso. 2 cracked ribs, a mild concussion, facial contusions, and a sprained wrist. The clinical accounting of what Kevin had done to her this time. Lily had fallen asleep in a nearby chair, her teddy bear clutched protectively against her chest, emotionally exhausted by the night's events. "The police want to take your statement when you're feeling up to it," the nurse said quietly, securing the bandage in place. "They've arrested your husband and his friend." "Ex-husband," Rachel corrected automatically. "The divorce was finalized 3 months ago. He refuses to accept it." The nurse nodded sympathetically. The officers mentioned something about an extended restraining order already being processed. "Really?" Rachel's surprise was evident. "That quickly?" "Apparently there's some special task force involved now," the nurse replied, checking Rachel's vital signs. "They seemed very determined." "Mom," Lily stirred, rubbing her eyes, "is the Vampire King still here?" The nurse shot Rachel a concerned look. "It's just a game," Rachel explained quickly. "She has an active imagination." The nurse's expression remained dubious. "The doctor wants to keep you overnight for observation because of the concussion. Your daughter can stay too. We'll bring in a cot." "Thank you," Rachel said. When the nurse had left, she turned to Lily. "Honey, you need to be careful talking about vampires. People will think it's strange." "But he was real," Lily insisted. "He helped us when nobody else would." "I know someone helped us," Rachel said carefully, "and I'm very grateful, but—" A soft knock interrupted her. The door opened to reveal Sebastian Drake, still immaculately dressed despite the late hour, looking strangely out of place against the sterile hospital backdrop. "May I enter?" he asked formally. "Vampire King!" Lily exclaimed, suddenly wide awake. She hopped down from her chair and ran toward him. Rachel tensed instinctively, her protective instincts flaring despite her gratitude. "Lily, come back here," she said firmly. To her surprise, Lily obeyed immediately, though she continued to beam at their unusual visitor. "Forgive the intrusion," Sebastian said, remaining in the doorway. "I wish to ensure you were receiving adequate care." "We're fine," Rachel said more sharply than she'd intended. She softened her tone. "Thank you for everything you did tonight." Sebastian entered the room with that peculiar, fluid grace she had noticed earlier, his movements too perfect, too controlled to be entirely human. The fluorescent hospital lights should have made him look ordinary, stripped of the mystique that shadows provided, but instead they only highlighted his otherworldliness, his skin too smooth, his eyes too deep, his stillness too complete when he chose not to move. "I have taken the liberty of making certain arrangements," he said. "Your ex-husband and his associate will remain in custody. The charges have been enhanced beyond simple assault." Rachel stared at him. "Enhanced? What does that mean exactly?" "It means," Sebastian replied with subtle precision, "that certain evidence has been made available to the authorities, evidence of prior incidents, of threats made in the presence of witnesses who previously feared coming forward, of financial misconduct involving his employer. Your ex-husband will face not merely assault charges, but charges of stalking, witness intimidation, embezzlement, and violation of existing protective orders. Rachel's mouth fell open slightly. How could you possibly arrange all that in just a couple of hours? I have existed for centuries, Miss Morgan. One does not survive that long without developing certain influences. He smiled thinly. Additionally, I have secured temporary accommodations for you and your daughter upon your release from medical care. He placed an envelope on the small table beside the door. The address and necessary keys are contained herein. The location is secure and unknown to your former husband or his associates. Lily looked up at her mother triumphantly. See, I told you he was the king. He can make anything happen. Rachel studied Sebastian with a complex mixture of gratitude, wariness, and growing fascination. His clothes were impeccable despite the night's events, not a wrinkle, not a speck of dust, as if the physical world couldn't quite touch him. And those eyes, they held a depth that made her shiver, not entirely from fear. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. "What do you want from us?" It was a fair question. In Rachel's experience, help always came with strings attached, especially from men. And this man, if he was just a man, had gone far beyond simple assistance. "I want nothing," Sebastian said, seeming genuinely unbothered by her suspicion. "Your daughter sought my aid. I have provided it." "Nobody does something for nothing," Rachel countered. Years of hard-earned wisdom in her voice, especially not someone with your resources. Sebastian's mouth curved slightly in what might have been amusement. "Perhaps that has been your experience with humans," he said. "My motivations are different." The way he emphasized humans sent a chill down Rachel's spine. She pulled Lily closer to her side. "What are you?" she asked again, more directly this time. "Mama, I told you," Lily said with the exasperation only children can muster. "He's the vampire king from the big house on the hill, the one the big kids talk about." Sebastian crossed to the window, gazing out at the night sky for a moment, before turning back to face them. The room felt smaller with him in it, not because of his physical size, but because of some intangible quality that seemed to fill the space around him. "Children have remarkable perception," he said, his voice soft, but carrying an undercurrent of something ancient. "They see the truth before the world teaches them to look away." Rachel found herself unable to look away from him. "You're not denying it," she said, realizing suddenly. "You're not laughing or making jokes about my daughter's imagination." "I have never found truth to be a laughing matter," Sebastian replied, "nor do I make a habit of lying to those who have earned my respect." "And we've earned your respect?" Rachel asked incredulously, gesturing to her hospital gown and bruised face. "Me, a beaten woman in a hospital bed, and a 7-year-old in penguin pajamas." Sebastian's expression grew more serious. "Your daughter crossed miles of dark woods on a winter night, alone, to seek help for you. She faced what most adults would consider monsters without flinching, and you—" His gaze moved to Rachel, intense but not unkind. "You have endured years of abuse while shielding her from the worst of it, planning your escape with patience and determination, never surrendering despite overwhelming odds. Yes, Ms. Morgan, you have both earned my respect." The simple dignity in his words brought unexpected tears to Rachel's eyes. She blinked them back, unwilling to show such vulnerability before this strange, powerful being. "You have raised a remarkable daughter, Ms. Morgan," he continued, "one who sees clearly and acts with courage. In 4 centuries I have rarely encountered such qualities in one so young." 4 centuries, Rachel repeated faintly. Sebastian stepped fully into the center of the room and closed the door behind him. The hospital sounds outside, beeping monitors, squeaking gurneys, murmured conversations, seemed to fade away, as if the room had been sealed in a bubble of silence. The air itself felt different, charged with a subtle energy that raised the fine hairs on Rachel's arms. "There are realities in this world that most humans never glimpse," he said quietly. "The mortal world, you know, is but the surface of a much deeper ocean. Beneath it swim creatures of power and mystery, some benevolent, others less so. For generations, That separation has been maintained through careful agreements and mutual disinterest. Your daughter accidentally crossed that boundary tonight." "Vampires," Rachel whispered, the word feeling strange on her tongue. No longer fiction, no longer fantasy, but suddenly terrifyingly real. "You're actually vampires." "We are," Sebastian confirmed, his stillness becoming even more profound, as if by acknowledging his nature, he no longer needed to maintain the small human movements, the shifting of weight, the occasional blink that had partially disguised his otherworldliness. "Though not as your entertainment media portrays us, we are neither soulless monsters nor misunderstood romantic heroes. We are other, older, different in ways beyond mere physical attributes." Lily, who had been listening intently, tugged at her mother's hospital gown. "The big kids at school knew," she said, with the satisfaction of a child whose outlandish claims have been vindicated. "They said the Vampire King can make anybody do whatever he wants." "Not anyone, little one," Sebastian corrected gently, his formal demeanor softening slightly when addressing the child. "But many. Power comes in many forms, some subtle, some overt. True authority lies not in forcing obedience, but in commanding respect." He turned his attention back to Rachel, who found herself struggling to absorb the implications of everything he was saying. Vampires existed. They lived alongside humans, hidden but present. They had their own society, their own rules, their own hierarchies, and her 7-year-old daughter had somehow found her way to their ruler and convinced him to help them. "Are we in danger from you?" she asked bluntly, her protective instincts overwhelming her amazement. "From your kind." Sebastian considered this with the careful deliberation of one who weighed words as precisely as jewelers weighed diamonds. "You are under my protection now," he said finally. "That status confers certain immunities. Few of my kind would dare to challenge it." "Few but not none," Rachel pressed, refusing to be distracted by diplomatic language. Sebastian's respect for her seemed to deepen at her persistence. "You were in far more danger from your former husband than you will ever be from me or mine," he replied directly. "The boundaries between our worlds exist for many reasons, but tonight those boundaries were crossed for a worthy cause. I do not regret my intervention, nor will I abandon the responsibility it created." "Responsibility," Rachel echoed. "Is that what we are to you, a responsibility?" Sebastian moved to stand at the foot of her hospital bed, his tall figure framed by the dim nightlights of the room. For a moment, just a moment, Rachel thought she saw something flicker in the depths of his eyes, something ancient and lonely and quietly yearning. "In 4 centuries," he said slowly, "one learns that connections are rare and precious things. Most mortals pass through my awareness like shadows, fleeting, insubstantial, forgotten. But occasionally—" He paused, his gaze moving between Rachel and Lily. "Occasionally, one encounters humans who shine with uncommon brightness. Your daughter is such a one, and you, I suspect, are another." Rachel swallowed hard. "What happens now?" "You recover. You and your daughter utilize the accommodations I have provided for as long as necessary. You rebuild your lives without fear." Sebastian's voice took on a subtle resonance that seemed to vibrate in Rachel's very bones. "The human authorities will ensure your former husband faces consequences for his actions. I have seen to that." "And you?" Rachel asked, unable to stop herself. "What do you get out of this?" Sebastian paused, seeming to consider the question with genuine introspection. "Perhaps a reminder," he said finally, "of courage, of directness, of seeing beyond appearances to possibilities." His gaze shifted to Lily, who had climbed onto the bed beside her mother and was listening with unexpected attentiveness for a child her age. "Immortality brings wisdom but also stagnation. Your daughter's intervention disrupted patterns centuries in the making. There is value in such disruption." He turned back to Rachel, and for the first time, she saw something vulnerable in his expression, a fleeting glimpse of the man he might have been before centuries of power and isolation had shaped him into something else. "For 400 years, and he continued softly, I have ruled through fear and power. My subjects obey because they must, not because they choose to. Even humans who know of our existence approach with terror rather than respect." A faint, rueful smile touched his lips. "Then this child appeared in my hall, fearlessly demanding not my mercy but my help. She saw not what I am, but what I could do, the purpose my power might serve rather than the fear it might inspire. It was illuminating." "I just needed help," Lily said simply, looking up at Sebastian with unguarded trust. "And the big kids said you make everyone do what you say." "Indeed." Sebastian's expression softened as he looked at her. "Your perspective was refreshing, Lily Morgan. You reminded me that power without purpose is ultimately hollow." He reached into his pocket and withdrew something small that caught the light, a delicate silver pendant on a fine chain. "This is for you," he said, offering it to Rachel. "It bears my house sigil. In the unlikely event you encounter others of my kind, they will recognize it as a mark of my protection. Few would dare to disregard it." Rachel accepted it hesitantly, the metal cool against her palm. The pendant depicted a raven with wings outstretched, clutching what appeared to be a key in its talons. The craftsmanship was exquisite, the silver seeming to absorb and reflect the light in ways that ordinary metal should not. "Thank you," she said quietly, closing her fingers around it. "For this, and for everything else." Sebastian inclined his head in acknowledgement. "The envelope also contains contact information should you require further assistance," he said. "I would ask that you maintain discretion regarding the nature of our interaction. The boundaries between worlds exist for good reasons." "No one would believe us anyway," Rachel said, still trying to process everything she'd learned. "Indeed." Sebastian's mouth quirked in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Though you might be surprised by how many humans suspect the truth. They simply choose not to see what their rational minds cannot accept." He glanced toward the window, where the faintest lightening of the sky suggested dawn was not far off. "I must take my leave soon. Daylight approaches." "Will we see you again?" Lily asked, her voice small but hopeful. Sebastian looked at her for a long moment, then at Rachel, his expression unreadable. "That would depend on your mother's wishes," he said finally. "My intervention in your lives need not extend beyond what has already been arranged." Rachel found herself caught between caution and an unexpected reluctance to sever this strange new connection. "Perhaps we could let you know when we're settled," she said carefully, "to thank you properly." Something flickered in Sebastian's eyes, surprise perhaps, or an emotion more complex. "I would find that acceptable," he said, the formal words at odds with the subtle warmth in his tone. He moved toward the door with that uncanny fluid grace. "Rest and recover, Ms. Morgan," he said, his hand on the doorknob. "Your daughter has earned you both a chance at peace." As he turned to leave, Lily suddenly scrambled off the bed and ran to him, wrapping her arms around his waist in an impulsive hug. "Thank you for saving my mama, Mr. Vampire King," she said, her face pressed against the fine fabric of his suit. For an instant, Sebastian stood frozen, clearly unprepared for such spontaneous physical contact. Then, slowly, he placed one pale hand gently on top of Lily's head, the gesture awkward but oddly tender. "You are welcome, Lily Morgan," he said, his voice softer than Rachel had yet heard it. "Your courage honors us both." When the door closed behind him, the hospital room seemed suddenly ordinary again, just fluorescent lights, antiseptic scents, and the distant sounds of the ward beyond. But Rachel knew with absolute certainty that nothing would ever be ordinary again. The world had changed tonight, or perhaps it was only her perception of it that had changed. Either way, there was no going back to ignorance, only forward into a reality far stranger and more wondrous than she had ever imagined. With that, he was gone, leaving Rachel and Lily alone in the suddenly ordinary hospital room. The sounds of the hospital returned, or perhaps they had never truly faded. Lily climbed onto the bed beside her mother, careful of her injuries. "He's nice," she declared, "for a vampire." Rachel wrapped her arm around her daughter, holding her close. "Lily, what you did tonight was incredibly dangerous. You could have been hurt, or worse." "But I wasn't," Lily pointed out reasonably. "And now Dad can't hurt us anymore." Rachel wanted to argue, to explain all the ways Lily's midnight adventure could have ended in tragedy. But the evidence was hard to dispute. Her daughter had somehow found the one being powerful enough to truly protect them from Kevin. "How did you even get to that mansion?" she asked instead. "It's miles from here, up in the hills." Lily shrugged. "I just kept walking. I wasn't scared of the dark. I was more scared of what would happen if I didn't find help." Rachel closed her eyes, overwhelmed by her daughter's matter-of-fact bravery. "Promise me you won't do anything like that again," she said, her voice shaking. "Promise me you'll always come to me first." "I promise," Lily said solemnly. Then she added, "Unless you're the one who needs help again." Rachel didn't have an answer for that. Instead, she held her daughter closer and stared at the envelope Sebastian had left. Keys to a new beginning, safety from Kevin, all because Lily had been brave enough, or desperate enough, to seek help from legends. "Get some sleep, baby," she whispered. "Tomorrow's going to be a new day." As Lily drifted off beside her, Rachel found herself gazing out the hospital window at the still-falling snow, wondering how many other secrets the darkness concealed. Vampires were real. They had lived alongside humans for centuries, ruling their own shadow society, while humanity remained largely oblivious. And now she and Lily knew. What would that knowledge mean for their future? The question followed her into uneasy dreams, where shadowy figures with ancient eyes watched from the periphery of her new life, not threatening but ever present. Guardians or observers? Only time would tell. As dawn approached, Sebastian Drake returned to Ravenscroft Manor, the eastern sky lightening to a dangerous pearl grey. The solstice feast had concluded hours ago, the grand hall now empty save for the servants quietly restoring order. His closest advisers waited in his private study, their concern evident despite their carefully composed expressions. Lady Victoria rose immediately as Sebastian entered. "Your lordship, we were becoming concerned for your well-being." "My well-being was never in question," Sebastian replied, removing his formal jacket and handing it to a waiting servant. "The night's events posed no threat to me. The human child," Lord Edmund ventured carefully, "has the situation been resolved?" "It has." Sebastian did not elaborate further. The advisers exchanged glances, clearly hoping for more information, but unwilling to press their sovereign directly. "The solstice feast concluded successfully in your absence," Lady Victoria reported, filling the awkward silence. "The territorial representatives have signed the winter agreements. The northern hunting grounds dispute has been postponed until the spring conclave." "Excellent," Sebastian said, though his tone suggested his thoughts were elsewhere. He moved to the window where heavy velvet drapes were already being drawn against the approaching dawn. "What do we know of domestic violence laws in Massachusetts?" The question was so unexpected that for a moment no one responded. "Your lordship?" Lord Edmund finally managed. "Domestic violence laws," Sebastian repeated patiently. "The enforcement patterns, the typical outcomes for perpetrators, the protections for victims. What do we know?" Lady Victoria, whose domain included managing relations with human authorities, cleared her throat. "They are inconsistent in their application, your lordship. Restraining orders are routinely violated without serious consequences. Victims frequently return to abusers due to economic necessity or fear. The system is deeply flawed." "So I observed," Sebastian said, his back still to them as he watched the last sliver of night disappear behind the closing drapes. "We shall require more extensive information on these matters and on resources available to human women and children seeking to escape such situations." The advisers exchanged bewildered glances. "Your lordship," Lord Edmund said carefully, "may I inquire as to your interest in this human concern?" "The Accords specifically limit our intervention in human affairs to matters that directly threaten our security." Sebastian turned from the window, his expression unreadable. "Are you familiar with the concept of noblesse oblige, Lord Pierce?" "Of course, your lordship." "Then you understand that power brings not merely privilege, but responsibility. The authority to command comes with the obligation to protect." Sebastian moved to his desk, an imposing piece of furniture carved from ancient oak that predated the colonization of America. For 4 centuries, I have ruled our kind with an emphasis on the former and perhaps too little attention to the latter. Your rule has been exemplary, Lady Victoria said quickly. Our territories have never been more secure, our position never stronger. And yet a human child sought me out specifically because of my power to command, Sebastian mused. Not for my compassion, which has never been in evidence, not for my justice, which has always been coldly pragmatic, but for my ability to make others obey. He looked up at his advisers, his ancient eyes suddenly sharp with intensity. Is that how we wish to be known in this modern age, as beings to be feared rather than respected, as tyrants rather than rulers? None of his advisers seemed to know how to respond to this philosophical turn. The child and her mother, Sebastian continued after a moment, I want them monitored, discreetly. Ensure their safety without their knowledge. The father is currently detained, but should he be released, I wish to be informed immediately. Yes, your lordship, Lady Victoria said, though her confusion was evident. May I ask, what is your interest in these particular humans? Sebastian considered the question. The child showed exceptional courage, he said finally. Such courage deserves recognition and protection. Additionally, he paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. She has seen our world. She knows what we are. That creates a connection and a responsibility. The traditional response would be to alter their memories, Lord Edmund pointed out. The Accords would support such action. The traditional response is not always the correct one, Sebastian replied, a note of finality in his voice. That will be all for tonight. The sun approaches. Rest well. The dismissal was clear. The advisers bowed and filed out, leaving Sebastian alone in his study. Only when the door closed behind them did he allow his perfect posture to relax slightly, settling into the chair behind his desk with a thoughtfulness that would have surprised his subjects. From a hidden drawer, he withdrew a small leather-bound journal. Its pages were yellowed with age, filled with elegant handwriting that reflected the penmanship of centuries past. He opened it carefully to an entry dated 1734, the ink faded but still legible. The boy died today, 12 years old, seeking shelter from his master's cruelty. He approached our gates not knowing what manner of creatures dwelled within. By our laws, I turned him away. By morning, his body was discovered in the river. They will say he drowned attempting to escape punishment. None will speak the truth of his bruises. I wonder if it was truly our laws I upheld, or merely my own indifference. Sebastian closed the journal slowly. 4 centuries of rule had brought him power, security, and unquestioned authority. But they had also calcified something within him, something that had stirred unexpectedly when a small girl with determined eyes had burst into his hall demanding justice. Remarkable, he murmured to the empty room. Most remarkable indeed. The sun climbed higher beyond the manor's protective walls. As vampires throughout the northeastern territories retreated into their daytime sanctuaries, the immortal lord sat alone with thoughts that had not troubled him in generations, thoughts of responsibility, of connection, and of a courage that transcended the boundaries between predator and prey. Something had changed in the world tonight, or perhaps more accurately, something had changed within him. Only time would reveal the full consequences of that change. For now, as dawn claimed the world outside, Sebastian Drake allowed himself to consider possibilities long abandoned. And in the quiet of his ancient study, that seemed like enough of a beginning.